Professor Dr. Sen Gupta is currently adjunct professor at School of Petroleum Technology, Pandit Deen Dayal Petroleum University, Gandhinagar. Sir did his PhD from MS University, Baroda in 93 and MTech and BTech from Nagpur University. Sir has 37 years of research experience, 34 years of teaching experience at DDIT and MS University. Sir has guided 6 PhD students and more than 45 ME research projects. Dr. Sengupta has published and reviewed many papers in national and international journals. Sir has completed 3 major research projects having total outlay of rupees 34 lakhs. Dr. Sengupta was member of UGC, AICTE, GPSC Committee for Selections, Projects and Awards. Dr. Sengupta was member of Syndicate of MSU Baroda, member of Senate of MSU Baroda, VC nominee Senate and Syndicate member, and Director Internal Quality Assurance Cell at the Maharaja Sayajirao University of Baroda. There are many more things to say, but because of time limit, I will not say much. Without wasting much of time, I request sir to take the charge of session. Please, sir. We are blessed to have you with us, sir. Thank you, sir, for accepting our invitation.
Thank you so very much, Dr. Tahil Ramani.
No, sir.
But the thing is this, that um, I feel very guilty when I am coming to address all of you because of two reasons. One is that the teachers as well as students, they are very enthusiastic, and over the past 2 weeks they have gone intensely through courses of green technology, sustainability, etc. from learned speakers. So they would be knowing certainly many, many more things than what I can even claim to know. So that is one of the reasons. And the other thing is this, that in my acts, I have never been a person who believed much in sustainability. Okay. So therefore, to give advice on sustainability is in a way difficult for me. I have been that way quite a wasteful person. So if, in my personal attributes, but that will not actually, I'll try to curb my, what I should say, attitudes and talk to you impartially about the topic that has been given to us, general topic, that is the course topic on sustainability and the role of green technology in sustainability. So I thought that instead of going much into technological aspects, because all of you are pretty well aware of many, many new things which I am not. I have not been in touch with green technologies for the last quite some time. And though I had practiced, I came to realize it today when I was trying to prepare some notes, that right from my first research project, wherein I was using ion exchange resins as a replacement for mineral acids for esterification reaction, that itself can be thought as green technology. Okay, so long back, that is 40 years back, but those things were never what I should say, I would say, commercialized on a large scale. So I would like to touch on things which are of commercial importance and on things which are also of some political importance. Okay, so let me begin, friends, with let me start my presentation, and I hope you like what I will be telling you. And if you don't find it interesting, then you can ask a lot of questions. Okay, and if I know the answers, I will answer. Okay, if I don't know, then obviously I will not be able to. So let me go to sustainability and let me prepare the slides thoda appropriately. Yeah, here I am. So it was a good topic that was taken up by Mr. Patel and Dr. Tahil Ramani when they thought of role of green technology in sustainable development. And it will certainly bring a lot of accolades to the parent institution, to GEC Bharuch, that they could think of and they could successfully conduct an STTP on this area. Okay. So what do we talk about sustainable development? What do we talk about green technology? And why have these things become important? That is something which is for all of us to wonder. Friends, are you able to see my slides?
Yes, sir.
Okay, very good.
Yes, sir.
So why has sustainable development become important? Why has green technology become important? Why is so much of stress given on international level to these ideas? Well, uh, you know, a lot of contribution to sciences comes from geology. After all, modern science, as we know it now, particularly biological sciences as well as sciences in general, they have the contribution of Charles Darwin is immense. Okay, it was Darwin who actually changed the shape of science. Though we give attributes to many people like Newton, Galileo, and so on and so forth, physical sciences they are given, but the contribution of Darwin is immense, and Darwin is not very far away. In the last 200 years that Darwin has been, his time frame, in that period, sciences has grown immensely. And similarly, it was again another geological investigation that has brought ushered in focus on green technology and sustainable development. See, this is a trend of atmospheric carbon dioxide. There is, you may be aware of, that in the Hawaii Islands, okay, there are a lot of volcanoes in different islands. And in one of those islands where the volcano is not active, Mauna Loa, there is an observatory which goes for carbon dioxide measurement. There is no inhabitation over there, so perhaps in thousands of kilometers around, there will be no, what I should say, settlements. There will be no industry, nothing. So whatever is the measurement of carbon dioxide that is made, that will be representative of the carbon dioxide, an average value that is present in the globe, because that will, which will be coming to around Mauna Loa by virtue of diffusion and by atmospheric movements. Now over there, this measurement is being done for a long time, since 1950s. But what is alarming is that when the data was looked into from 1960s, we find that there is a very steady increase in the amount of carbon dioxide, in the atmospheric carbon dioxide. And in the last 60 years, 1960 to 2020, there has been an increase of around 100 parts per million. Okay, 100 ppm increase in the carbon dioxide content in the atmosphere. And you know that carbon dioxide is a greenhouse gas. This rapid increase in carbon dioxide is primarily because of industrialization, because of traffic, because of the you can say. And this is something which was actually very worrisome, causing a lot of anxiety, and why this is happening. Okay, and they have been wondering for quite some time. Not that they are wondering now, but only thing is this, that they started wondering about it since 1990, 85, 90, around this time when the increase from 320 to 360, around that time itself, people started wondering. Various non-government agencies worldwide, organizations which dealt with environment, they started creating a lot of noise. There was panic around, and people started wondering what is happening. And then at that time, the United Nations took cognizance of these effects. Okay, and as a result of the United Nations interest into this rapid increase in a greenhouse gas in the environment and its possible consequences. Okay, the consequences I need not tell. Consequences would be global warming and all the ill effects associated with global warming, which would be difficult for, which would make difficult for life to, what I should say, sustain peacefully on Earth. So what United Nations did was that they chose an Norwegian politician. This lady is Gro Harlem Brundtland, and she was a Norwegian politician who served 3 terms as Prime Minister and was Director General of World Health Organization also. So they assigned Mrs. Brundtland with the responsibility to chair a commission and give a report on the development on Earth, particularly developments and its effect on Earth. Okay. Now that report is known as the Brundtland Commission report. And the definition of sustainability, it stems from the Brundtland Commission report. And that report is available also in book form. It's titled Our Common Future. Our Common Future is actually the Brundtland Commission report. Now in this report, it defines sustainable development as development that meets the needs of present without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their own needs. This is what I should say, very deeply thoughtful statement. Okay, development that meets the needs of present without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their own needs. So that's why there is very often a phrase which goes on that don't steal from your children. Okay, don't steal the resources from your children. Okay, now this commission successfully unified environmentalism with social and economic concerns of the world development agenda. So it mixed environmental aspects with social aspects and economic concerns of the world. That is how the word sustainability came into picture, and that is how it was defined. Okay, there are many other definitions of sustainability, but this one is the United Nations definition. Now, what is the primary goal of sustainability? What do we want to achieve by sustainability? This again, in 2012, the United Nations Conference on Sustainable Development, they met to discuss and develop a set of goals which nations should work towards. Now, what were those goals? These goals are the primary goals of sustainability. The thing is this, right at the top is the end of poverty and hunger. In spite of all the prosperity in the world, there is still a lot of poverty and hunger in every single country. Okay, uh, whether they are advanced or whether they are developing or whether they are underdeveloped. Better standards of education and healthcare. Now, this is something which we need not talk about because the corona pandemic that is raging, it has opened up all the truth of our healthcare systems globally. So none of the nations is well protected, but we need to go for better standards of education and healthcare, and particularly as it pertains to water quality and better sanitation. Okay. To achieve gender equality, which certainly is non-existent or existent to a very little extent in most of the countries, not just in India. Because you should remember one thing and be proud of it, that India, right from its first election, the adult franchise was irrespective of gender. Male and females both did vote. But in the United States, as well as many other European countries, women were allowed to vote only many decades after the men could vote. Sustainable economic growth while promoting jobs and stronger economies. So you need to have economic growth, because if you don't have economic growth, then there'll be no jobs. Okay, or there won't be many jobs around and you can't build strong economies. And all of the above and more while tackling the effects of climate change, pollution and other environmental factors that can harm and do harm to people's health, livelihoods and lives. Sustainable to include health of land, air and water. This is very important. Sustainability to include health of land, air and water. Sustainability actually stands on 3 pillars. Okay, and those pillars are primarily the pillars which are associated with people, pillars of the environment, that is our planet, and the economy. So these are the 3, what I should say, activities, or you can say 3 things which we are involved with all our lives. Okay, the people need to be involved with the environment, whether they like it or not. People need to be involved with economy. The environment is always involved with economy, and the economy needs people. Okay, but when all these 3 regions they merge in a very small region. Okay, there is large merger, can be large merger between the environment and people. There can be large merger between economy and people. There can be large merger between economy and environment, but all the 3 things, the 3 body problem, you see, there's a small region in which all the 3 regions of people, planet and profit, they all merge. And it is this region which is the region of sustainability. Very small region and very delicate region. So we have to look into sustainability with great caution. So that's what I have written over here. Again, the pillars of sustainability, you have environmental sustainability, which is ecological integrity is maintained. All of our environmental systems are kept in balance, while natural resources within them are consumed by humans at a rate where they are able to replenish themselves. natural resources are consumed by humans at a rate where they are able to replenish themselves. Is it happening now? What about fossil fuels? Fossil fuels are being consumed at a rate where it will take few million years to get replenished, if they are replenished at all. Think about it. Economic sustainability. Human communities across the globe are able to maintain their independence and have access to the resources that they require, financial and others, to meet their needs. Economic systems are intact and activities are available to everyone, such as secure source of livelihood. So there has to be activities available for everyone so that there is a possibility of livelihood for everyone. Now, all governments, they try to work on these, but these things are difficult to attain, whether you have a pandemic or whether you don't have a pandemic. Even when we did not have a pandemic, were we able to provide economic livelihood to everybody? This is something which we have to think about. And finally comes social sustainability, where universal human rights and basic necessities are attainable to all people who have access to enough resources in order to keep their families and communities healthy and secure. Okay, friends. So this is about the definition of sustainability and how the Brundtland report has introduced it, and why it did happen. For instance, the carbon dioxide content went up, but the most alarming thing is here. This is, you will wonder why I'm showing you this and what is it about. This is about the time it took for the world population to increase by 1 billion. Today we are 7 billion people, you know. Today we are 7 billion people, or perhaps slightly more than 7 billion, nearly 8 billion. You know, in 1809, if you are able to see this slide carefully, then you will find that 1803. Okay. Up to then, there were just 1 billion people. In 124 years since then, in 1927, it became 2 billion. Then 33 years from that, by 1960, it became 3 billion. And by 1975, it became 4 billion. In 15 years' time, 4 billion. And thereafter, in every 12 years, 13 years, a billion population is being added. Now, why it's happening? Has the fertility gone up tremendously? Or are we, if you want to study this, then you will have to look at what we call as the predator-prey problems in mathematics. It's not a question of actually the large increase in growth rates of human population, as we may wrongly come to conclusion. No, it's not really about the growth rates. It is about the reduction in death rates. See, the reduction in death rates and the large increase in life expectancy, which are very good, that has led to this large increase in world population. It has got tremendous consequences because it has put all our resources under strain. It has put what I should say, the food in shortage, and it has created lot of what I should say shortages and problems for various governments to maintain their ends. There is something else which I'll show you. So this is it, friends. Up to 1800, 1 billion, 127 years since then, 1927, 2 billion, then 1963 billion, 74, 4 billion, 87, 5 billion, 99, 6 billion, 2011, 7 billion, now 2023 projection is 8 billion, and 10 billion, 11 billion, perhaps, yes, over here, after 2055, there will be shortage, there will be a decline in the growth. Okay, but till then, we will be filled till our seams. Okay, it will be very difficult times for the earth. Okay, and don't think that we will be easily able to tide this through, because the growth that is taking place is of human beings, and human beings have needs that need to be satisfied, and I really don't know how things will take shape in future. But one thing I'm going to tell you about right now is this. How much does human breathing contribute to climate change? Because we are adding 1 billion people every 10 years or 12 years, so we need to see. See, we actually breathe in oxygen and we breathe out carbon dioxide. Okay. Now, the fine balance of oxygen and carbon dioxide is getting disturbed. Carbon dioxide is increasing because of industrialization, because of so many other things. Okay. And the oxygen content, I don't know, but perhaps if we make a study, we'll find that it is depleting because we are cutting out forests and things like that. And we also use oxygen in various combustion processes. But for carbon dioxide, see, in one day, an average person breathes around 500 liters of carbon dioxide. So in one day, 500 liters of carbon dioxide is almost equal to 1 kilogram in mass. Now, it doesn't really sound much, but this is an old data. Okay, this is an data of when the population was 6.8 billion. Now it is 8 billion. So what happens is, at that time, if you say 1 kg is being breathed out by one person in one day, so if it is 8 billion, it will be 8 billion kgs. 8 billion kgs is how many? 8 million tons per day. So you can make the calculation. So collectively, you see, breathing accounts for around 2,500 million tons of carbon dioxide every year. Now, this is actually 7% of the total carbon dioxide tonnage, which is churned out by burning of fossil fuels. So it's not a small figure, and it's not something to be joked about. The contribution of human breathing to carbon dioxide content is almost equal to traffic. Okay. So friends, this is something which only in time we will be able to heal, but we need to be thoughtful about it. Now, before moving to some other topic, I'd like to tell you something about the circles of sustainability, because we were talking primarily about sustainability. So the circles of sustainability is actually a method for understanding and assessing sustainability and managing projects which are directed towards socially sustainable outcome. Different regions have their own requirements, so socially sustainable outcomes is the objective. It is intended to handle some problems which seem to be unsolvable and intractable problems. And those problems have been outlined in various sustainable development debates. It is something like this. So for different urban areas which have been taken up for study, in India at least two of them are reported. One is for Hyderabad and another is for Delhi. And you will find, and this one is for Melbourne. So there are different aspects which are studied. Economics is studied, politics is studied, ecology is studied, culture is studied. You are not able to see what is in between. I'll show you later on. And from there, people make an assessment that whether the condition is vibrant. When it is vibrant and green, that means something very good is there. Slightly less green, this is bright green, this is vibrant. Slightly less green is good. And this is satisfactory. Less green is satisfactory. Okay. And when you have this brown coming in, it is unsatisfactory. And when it goes to red or dark brown, it is bad. The red is not shown over here. Okay, so let us see what are the the points on which these things have been looked into. So when it comes to economy, you look into production and resourcing, exchange and transfer. These are the aspects of economy you are stressing on. Accounting and regulation, consumption and use, labor and welfare, technology and infrastructure, wealth and distribution. When it comes to ecology, you talk about materials and energy, water and air, flora and fauna, habitat and settlements, built forms and transport, embodiment and sustenance, emission and waste. So there are people, United Nations trained people who try to look into all these aspects and they give some points. They say whether these things are good or not in a particular urban center. This is for urban centers. As I told you that what you saw over there is for Melbourne. In terms of politics, you see its organization and governance is one aspect, law and justice, communication and critique, representation and negotiation, security and accord, dialogue and reconciliation, ethics and accountability. Now, when you look, we have seen economics, we have seen ecology, we have seen politics. Now you see that there are different, according to the number of subheadings, there are different zones which are kept. Okay, in each side. So you see with Delhi, Delhi is almost everything is highly unsatisfactory, except for some things which are basic. Okay, so in ecology, let us see what is the second point in ecology, water and air. That is at least elementary things are being provided in Delhi. Okay, so they are happy about it. At least something to be happy about. And economics, it is the second, the fourth, and the sixth. So let us see. The second, exchange and transfer, consumption and use, and technology and infrastructure. So these are at least basic things are there. When it comes to politics in Delhi, some are basic, mostly unsatisfactory, some are bad, but there is something which is better than others, and that is the third point, which is communication and critique. So at least you can still go and criticize the government and still be free. Freedom of speech is there. You can criticize, but that doesn't solve neither your problems nor the government's problem nor our problem, anybody's problem. But that freedom is there. And then comes the last aspect of culture. Let us see. And culture is, these are the points: identity and engagement, creativity and recreation, memory and projection, belief and ideas, gender and generations, inquiry and learning, well-being and health. So when you look for Hyderabad in culture, particularly in culture, you find that identity and engagement is, they are happy about it, it's fairly good, and these things are quite satisfactory. That is, in case of belief and ideas, inquiry and learning, well-being and health, these are aspects which are good in Hyderabad, but in other cases, many things in ecology is very bad. Okay, so can't help. But these things can change over the period of time. Okay, so so far as sustainability is concerned, you have seen how to analyze sustainability, or at least not, if not perfectly, at least in what I should say, in an empirical manner, and that is using the circles of sustainability. So now let us come to something which is more closer to what we understand. So how you approach sustainable development? Your goal is sustainable development. Okay. And if you want sustainable development without increasing the difficulties of people, of environment, and at the same time having a good economy, then you need to approach via green chemistry and green engineering route. You need to have a good idea of industrial ecology, and you have to move towards renewable energy. Moving towards renewable energy will be much more helpful in comparison with using fossil fuels as energy. And it is because of this that even the government of India has given lot of what I should say advantages for electrically driven vehicles. Okay, so that people move towards renewable energy. You find that in most of the coastal areas there are a lot of windmills which have been installed, and wind energy is now being generated in India in considerable amount. Solar energy, you find many rooftops have got solar energy panels. Lot of what I should say government uh, privileges are being given to those who are installing such things. That is all to promote renewable energy, so that our what I should say dependence on fossil fuels they decrease. And these are the approaches. And what are the operational tools? The operational tools will be catalysis, go for more and more catalytic processes, which will not consume much of energy, which will not release much of waste. Go for waste management techniques. Go for process identification, intensification techniques. Okay, use technologies which will intensify the process. And what are the monitoring tools? The monitoring tools would be the life cycle assessment and the E factor and atom economy. So this then brings us to the main topic, which is of the program, that is of green engineering and green chemistry. Now, what is green technology or green engineering and green chemistry? Green chemistry is the design of chemical products and processes that reduce or eliminate use or generation of hazardous substances. It will reduce or eliminate the use or generation of hazardous substances. Green chemistry can also be described as sustainable chemistry. Chemistry that is benign by design, that is, it is not intrusive by design, which will be not damaging by design. Pollution prevention will be taking place at molecular level, and all these things will be attained. So when you look at green chemistry, then the founders of green chemistry, they actually suggested 12 principles of green chemistry. And these 12 principles, I'm sure all of you must have studied. Okay. And they are: prevention of waste is better than treatment of waste. Therefore, prevention is better than cure, as you say. So prevention of waste is better than treatment of waste. Second is to go for atom economy, so that all the atoms that are used of the reactants are used in the product. You don't have any excess atoms over there. You go for less hazardous chemical synthesis. So go for electroorganic synthesis or things like that, which are much less hazardous, much more precise. And those days will come. Then you can design safer chemicals. Use safer solvents and auxiliaries. Design for energy efficiency. Use renewable feedstocks. Go for more and more catalytic processes. Design for degradation, that is biodegradation. Everything or every product that comes in after its life cycle is over, it can be degraded. Real-time analysis for pollution prevention. Go for inherently safer chemistry for accident prevention. These are the 12 principles of green chemistry, which are fundamental, which as it is, organizations, corporates are trying to implement, but believe me, it is much easier said than done. It is a very difficult task. And some examples I will show you, and you will come to realize that commercially doing this is not easy. Okay. Now, what are the drivers of green chemistry initiatives? First is economic benefit, right at the top. Okay. Or shall we start from the left? So you have societal pressure. Now society is insisting, so therefore we have to go for it. Improved public image for the government. Safer plants for the industry. Pollution control for society. Okay. All these things achieved by green chemistry. Economic benefit is that you will have lower capital investment and lower operating cost. Okay, so there will be quite some economic benefit. And what the government will gain or earn, it will be using less hazardous materials, high fines for waste, and producer responsibility. Now, all of you, most of you are working in a region which is a highly industrialized region. I have been associated with some industries over there which deal with hazardous wastes. And I know the great difficulty that people find in disposing of these hazardous wastes, because the rules and policies, they change overnight. Just by a document you can change a policy, but you can't change the performance of a plant overnight. And if you close down a plant, the proprietor can sit and relax for perhaps his lifetime. But what about the hundreds of employees over there? What about their livelihoods? So that when it comes to social responsibilities, then many things can't be done. It is very easy to say. So we have to take into account all these things before. And another thing is, which is very important, is we must try to provide alternatives. And we should not take a very, what I should say, extremal viewpoint. You know, you have a, what I should say, very balanced opinion about things. Now, if you want to know how green your process is, how green is my process? So there has to be some metric. And that metric was introduced by E factor. And this is a measure which was introduced by Roger Sheldon in 1994. Now, what is an E factor? For any reaction, the E factor is the ratio of kg waste upon kg product. Now, waste is everything formed in the reaction except the desired product. So, if there are byproducts also, that will also be considered as waste. Okay, so kg waste upon kg product. And then when you look at different industrial sectors in the chemical industry, you have petrochemicals, you have bulk chemicals, you have fine chemicals, you have specialty chemicals, you have pharmaceuticals. And the production capacities are in petrochemicals 10 to the power 6 to 10 to the power 8 tons per year. That is million tons to 100 million tons. Bulk chemicals 10 to the power 4 tons per year to 10 to the power 6. That is a million ton. Fine chemicals is from 100 to 10,000 tons per year. Specialty chemicals, pharmaceuticals is from 10 tons per year to 1,000 tons per year. And what you find is E factors for petrochemicals is less than 0.1. Bulk chemicals, it becomes 1 to 5. Fine chemicals, 5 to 50. Specialty chemicals, 20 to 100. That means amongst all these sectors, the least polluting is petrochemicals. This is very contrary to our understanding. But this is a fact. That is that the amount of waste produced per kg of product in case of petrochemicals is very small. It is 0.1. In bulk chemicals, almost for every kg of product produced, you have 1 to 5 kgs of waste. Fine chemicals, 5 to 50 kgs of waste. Specialty chemicals, to कहना ही नहीं. So why do we require to have so much of waste? Because these are all multi-step processes. They are multi-step processes and there are multiple stages in that process. So there will be lot of waste which will be generated. I will show you one calculation. And before that we'll see another metric. And that is the metric of atom economy. The concept of atom economy was introduced by Barry Trost in 1991. And here we consider how many atoms of the reactant are incorporated in the product. If all the atoms of the reactant are incorporated in the product, the atom economy is 100%. We would like the atom economy to be 100%. Now just one example I am taking for calculation to show you the E factor. Now suppose you are taking the case of oxidation of diphenyl methanol to benzophenol. This conversion takes place by using chromium trioxide and sulfuric acid. This equation is not balanced, otherwise there would have been 3 over here and some other terms over here. Okay, the equation is not balanced. So diphenyl methanol plus chromium trioxide plus H2SO4 forms benzophenone and chromium sulfide and water. Okay, now see what happens. So we find that we get 3 moles of diphenyl methanol. It reacts with 2 moles of chromium trioxide, Cr2O3, I'm sorry. Okay. And 3 moles of H2SO4 to get 3 moles of benzophenone. Now when you examine the E factor, we find that every 3 moles of benzophenone, we produce 1 mole of chromium trisulfide and 6 moles of water. The molecular weight, quite a good stoichiometry problem. In fact, we should give such problems in stoichiometry to students so that they are right at the beginning of these aspects. So the molecular weight of benzophenone is 182.2 kg per kg mole. Now for every kg of benzophenone, we are producing 1.83 kgs of chromium trisulfate, which is equal to 0.717 kgs, and 10.98 moles of water, which is 0.197 kgs. These are all gram moles. Okay. So the E factor will become the kg waste 0.717 plus 0.197 divided by 1. So this turns out to be 0.914. In this, we have assumed that there is conversion is up to 100%. But if the conversion is not up to 100%, in that case, these figures would go up, isn't it? This will become much larger. So this is how the calculations are done. Okay. So let us, having identified E factor and atom economy, let me go for some reactions. Chemical engineers without reactions doesn't make much sense. Let us consider the synthesis of propylene oxide. Now, propylene oxide is rather a mundane chemical, you know. People think, what is there in propylene oxide? You don't realize that propylene oxide is produced annually at the rate of around 8 million tons per annum. And it is used, it's an important bulk chemical used for the synthesis of propylene glycol, polyethers, glycerol, and host of other products. And the beauty of this is that it is not like ethylene oxide. Ethylene oxide, you know, by using silver catalyst, you can react ethylene with molecular oxygen and get ethylene oxide. Okay, though the plants are dangerous. But here, there is no direct process for oxidizing propylene to propylene oxide using molecular oxygen. So we have not yet developed a catalyst by which you can convert propylene to propylene oxide using molecular oxygen. Okay, most common route where only propylene oxide is obtained as the main product is the chlorohydrin route. So in chlorohydrin route, what happens is you react propylene with chlorine in presence of water. Okay, so this is hypochlorous acid. So you are reacting propylene with chlorine. That's why that is chlorine plus water. You will get hypochlorous acid will be there, and you get chlorohydrin. And this chlorohydrin is then decomposed to get propylene oxide and HCl. This is the traditional route of propylene oxide. It is certainly generating waste because HCl is there. So HCl is not something which is very desirable. What you do with HCl? Okay. So because you are using HOCl as the hypochlorous acid as a reagent, so because of this and HCl is formed, so you will have to actually neutralize that HCl. So you'll have to add sodium hydroxide to it, HCl and sodium hydroxide. Okay, so you see that the E factor is going for a jerk. Okay, so you are getting, but you are getting propylene oxide. It is producing waste. People know that this is not a good route, but still worldwide, this is the most predominant route. 40%, if not most, at least one of the most important routes. More than 40% of all propylene oxide is produced by this technique. Okay. So what are the alternatives? The other alternative is good. Okay. Let me show you that alternative. That alternative is SMPOs, styrene monomer propylene oxide process. This is introduced by LyondellBasell, a Swiss company. They are leaders in many of such petrochemicals. So here what happens is you react benzene with ethylene to get ethyl benzene over zeolite, you get ethyl benzene. Now this ethyl benzene is oxidized with air to get ethyl benzene hydroperoxide. Okay, so ethyl benzene is oxidized with air to get ethyl benzene hydroperoxide. And this ethyl benzene hydroperoxide is reacted with propylene. Okay, over a catalyst, epoxidation catalyst, which is titanium over porous silica. Titanium over porous silica. And you are getting propylene oxide and benzyl alcohol, propylene oxide and benzyl alcohol. Okay, actually it is not direct benzyl, it's alpha methyl benzyl alcohol. It is not shown, CS3 group is not shown. So propylene oxide and alpha methyl benzyl alcohol. And then what you do is that alpha methyl benzyl alcohol, you dehydrate over alumina and regenerate styrene, and you get styrene. So there are two things which are formed. Propylene oxide you have got in this epoxidation route, and this dehydration you do and you get styrene. Now this is certainly a much far cleaner route than the previous one. And atom economy, if you see, is very good, almost 100%. Perhaps if you calculate the E factors, they will also be good. But the problem is there that for 1 kg of propylene oxide, you get 2.5 kgs of styrene. Now, what are you going to do with styrene? Styrene is an important compound, but there is quite some excess of styrene in the world, and styrene market fluctuates dramatically. So whether we will be able to sell the styrene or not, what to do with this styrene? Propylene oxide is more valuable than styrene, though in market terms styrene price will be more than propylene oxide price. But what to do? Whether we can use it? Well, that's a question of economics, and unless this is addressed, the SMPO process doesn't have much of a future. The technology is there, but takers may not be there. Now let us come to a process which is doing very well now. There are many routes for obtaining propylene oxide. The latest route is the route which is the Sumitomo process. Okay, in the Sumitomo process, what happens is cumin in air, no, or cumin, not cumin in air. Cumin is air oxidized to get cumin hydroperoxide. So you have got cumin is air oxidized to get cumin hydroperoxide, and cumin hydroperoxide is epoxidized in presence of an active catalyst, that is again the titanium on silicon dioxide, to get propylene oxide and dimethyl benzyl alcohol. Okay, get dimethyl benzyl alcohol. And the dimethyl benzyl alcohol is hydrogenated in presence of hydrogenation catalyst to regenerate cumin back. So this is how the process goes. Okay, so you start with cumin. Okay, you see it's perfectly circular, like a biochemical process. Cumin reacting with oxygen to form cumin hydroperoxide. Cumin hydroperoxide will with propylene to form propylene oxide, and dimethyl benzyl alcohol. Dimethyl benzyl alcohol is hydrogenated to get the cumin back, and this is how the process goes on. Currently, the Sumitomo process, at least in Japan, there are two plants of around 200,000 tons per annum, 200,000 tons per annum, and there is one plant which is being installed somewhere in the Middle East. Okay, again of that same capacity. So this is going to be the process of future, because you will find that it's certainly a greener process. It has got many attributes. It is satisfying many attributes of green technology and atom economy and things like that. Then we are coming to the end of our lecture. I am happy. Then another feature, let me tell you, is which is again example of commercial use of green technology. It is the BP Chemicals Avada ethyl acetate process. Okay. Ethyl acetate is formed by conventionally reacting ethanol with acetic acid. It's an esterification reaction. All esterification reactions are catalyzed by mineral acids, which can be H2SO4, H3PO4, and things like that. Okay, or you can catalyze it with ion exchange resins, which are in H plus form. This is something which I did when I was an MTech student. Okay, very exciting. Okay, I got my master's. I got a paper also, but and like me, there were hundreds of people who have got their master's or doctoral work on use of ion exchange resins for various esterification reactions, but none of them have got commercialized. Okay. So what happens is the conventional processes, there are actually two. One I said about ethanol and acetic acid. Acetic acid esterification, and the second one is condensation of aldehyde. They all rely on acid-base catalyst. Because what happens is when you're using the ion exchange resin, you never get the rate of reaction which would be commercially viable. Okay, there will always be problems related to separations. Okay, then similarly, when you have an mineral acid catalyzed reaction, then what will happen is that there will be problems related to separation, there will be problems related to neutralization, and so on and so forth. It was in 1990 that BP, British Petroleum has got many anecdotes and attributes to it. I'll tell you something later. So in 1990, BP called its managers who were running such ethyl acetate plant and told them that either you find out a better method or you shut the plant. So it was then that this thing got developed, which is known as advanced acetates by direct addition. Now in this process, you see what you do is you take ethylene and react it with acetic acid. Look at this reaction. So ethylene with acetic acid over a hyperperoxide acid catalyst. Okay. So ethylene plus acetic acid over a peroxide catalyst, which is deposited on silica or something like that. I have it in the next slide. And you get ethyl acetate. So you have bypassed the requirement of ethanol. No ethanol. Ethylene and acetic acid only. So what you do is you take and vaporize. You need to vaporize acetic acid. Its boiling point is 113. If this is, conditions are not known. If this is an atmospheric pressure, I'm telling you. So you require a vaporizer. Then you have a reactor. Subsequently, there are a number of distillation columns, and there will be a vapor recycle. There will be a vapor phase which will be coming. It will be recycled back. That is mostly ethene. The liquid will go to the second distillation column where it will be separated out, and mostly again there will be acetic acid which will be recycled back and converted acetic acid. And over here you have a light end recovery and ethyl acetate comes out. Now what are the conditions, that is not known, but commercially extremely successful, and in terms of atom economy you see it's 100%. This is the plant which is in stream at a place in England called Hull, and it has got a capacity of 220 kilotons per annum. There is another plant which is coming up. Okay. This process, as I told you, converts ethylene and acetic acid directly to ethyl acetate, cutting out esterification in need of ethanol. The catalyst used is heteropolyacid, supported on porous silica, and it produces 99.98% pure ethyl acetate. works with 100% atomic economy, saves 20% energy, and uses several green chemistry principles. And very interestingly, it won the 2002 AstraZeneca Award for Excellence in Green Chemistry and Engineering. AstraZeneca is not only in vaccines, it's also in the chemical industry. So BP did a very good job. And I told you something that I'll talk about BP. BP in 2000, the chairman of BP said, BP stands for British Petroleum. He said that now we are no longer British Petroleum because we are all over the world. Rather, we should name our company as Beyond Petroleum. And they went for many initiatives into biotechnology and other things. I don't know how successful they are. But friends, this is where my talk comes to an end. I hope I have not been extremely repetitive. I hope I could give you something which is which will stay with you for some time. Okay. I have not talked about the devices like the reactors and the type of processes that can be there. All those things are well chronicled, they are documented. But what we need to do is we need to have the political will if you want to go into sustainability. And I have not used any quotes in between. So therefore, I will end with one of my most favorite quote amongst all quotes. And only Gandhi could have said this. So friends, Mahatma Gandhi said that we have one earth, and earth has enough for everyone's needs, but not everyone's greed. So if we can have a check on our greed, we can satisfy everyone's need. Thank you so much. So if you have any queries, something, I will be happy to answer if I know the answers. Okay.
Thank you so much. Yes, ma'am, please continue.
Participants can ask questions. No question?
Boys are shy. Students are shy. I shouldn't say boys are shy.
All the participants are requested, if you have any questions, you can ask to sir, please. It's really an opportunity for all of us to interact with sir.
I hope they didn't fall asleep.
Am I audible, sir?
Yeah,
Yes,
yeah,
yes,
yeah.
yes.
Please.
Yes, you are audible, please.
Sir, I have a question. I have a question arise, sir. That sir, as you have described, sir, this last two process for ethyl acetate and one propylene oxide, sir. Sir, by this way, sir, by using green technology principles, sir, if they are going to produce or they are taking production, sir, then it will be uh, beneficiary for them, or in economics point, sir, it is they are earning from that running that plant, sir.
I'm sure they are earning, though I can't tell you for sure. But I can vouch that they are earning. Otherwise, they wouldn't have installed these plants. You know, it's only in India that you run plants while making losses, whether it is in public sector or whether it is in private sector. But in Western world, they are far more commercially aware than us. Okay, and they don't have any qualms and they won't keep their people employed. They will simply sack them. Okay, the thing is this, that yes, because when you look at petrochemicals, you know, the main earning in petrochemicals comes from energy savings. And these processes are leading to large energy savings. They are being catalytic processes. What is happening is that the costly separation stages are being considerably reduced. So therefore, there leaves a lot of scope for these companies to earn. So yes, I am sure that they are earning, and they are earning pretty handsomely.
Okay, sir.
Anyone else? No question? I think we are at the end of session. Thank you, sir. Sir has taught green technology and sustainable development in a different way, considering economy, ecology, politics, and culture, which is not available in any book. So, audience participants, they might have enjoyed a lot. Sir is renowned faculty in the field of chemical engineering, and sir has taught 3 pillars of sustainable development. But I would like to say sir is pillar for us. Sir is pillar in progress and development of his students. His contribution in the field of chemical engineering is highly appreciable. Thank you, sir, for always guiding us. Sir has taught the same topic by considering data interpretation and discussing various case studies, that is making the presentation very, very interesting. Sir, we are very thankful to you. After so many after so many years, we have attended your lecture, and what we all your students are today because of your guidance only. Thank you very much for guiding us, and thank you for teaching in such a wonderful way, considering the data, practical data, analyzing them, and explaining the thing with various case studies, so the students can also remember it for lifetime. Thank you, sir. Thank you very much for being with us.
So I thank all the eminent faculty over here that they took a lot of pains to conduct this workshop, and they have been dedicated, and that's why they are immensely successful. It is very rare that with dedication you will not get success. Very, very rare. So whenever you are dedicated, when you have the opportunity, you get success. And I must compliment you all for choosing such a good topic, a very good topic. And in fact, I would recommend you that I don't know about the different lectures. You can give title to all the lectures and you try to compile them, try to refine them by talking with the speakers and bring out a bound volume. That will be a great job which will be done. And I am sure one of the companies in Bharuch or GNFC or things like that, they will sponsor you for the publication costs. You take that opportunity. So Naresh, that is something, you gather some money. And
yes, sir.
I'm sure this will become a successful venture, and it will speak volumes of the contribution by the Chemical Engineering Department of GEC.
Okay. Okay. Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you so much. So
thank you so much, sir, for accepting our invitation and for your valuable presence. Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you, Arun. So I can leave now, Reshma?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Yes, yes.
Yes, sir.
Thank you so
Thank
much.
you so much.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay.